WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We are, I guess, no longer a sports entity around here. I'm figuring I'm going to continue to call on my same group of intelligent friends from inside and outside the sports community. This guy was my first media friend from the News American. I actually said the News American the other day, Chris Pika, and someone actually knew what it was. So I thought it was just awesome that I did that because it has been, 36, 37 years now. And we finally have a pandemic. I don't know how to behave during a normal pandemic. I do realize there's no basketball, no hockey, no football, no baseball, and, well, there is some football off the field, but we'll get to Calais Campbell later. But certainly for our culture and for where we are, you lived through this in Katrina, in New Orleans, and sort of the strangeness of all of this. How are you, Blog and Tackle, back from the road and back from where you thought you'd be doing basketball games yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I went to the Frisco, Texas, to the Conference USA Basketball Championships. I've worked that event for CUSA the last 6 years, and was very strange and interesting times when you get there on Monday and you go, got there late Monday. Tuesday is a practice day.
Teams are arriving, right?
Teams are arriving. You have practice all day. The CUSA format is they do it inside the Cowboys practice facility at the Star in Frisco, the Ford Center. They split the football field. They lay flooring down, put the basketball flooring up there. They basically run two courts. So what you have is the women's tournament starts in the morning at 11 a.m. local time, and then Central Time, and then the men's tournament, the four games on two courts alternating, start at 6 o'clock at night. So
I was watching the games. I was sitting in State Fair watching it last week, yes.
Yeah, and so you've got these games going on, and you've got two courts, and you're back and forth and all that. So we got through the first day, or most of the first day, and then obviously the headlines begin to hit on Wednesday, the first day of the tournament. Here is, Tuesday into Wednesday, the NBA player tests positive. The Ivy League has decided to cancel their tournament and all spring sports, which is really the first domino to drop. And I think all of us there kind of looked at that. I know I did, and I showed some upper people at Conference USA, some of the upper administrators, and they all just kind of cocked their eyes a little bit because that was a statement from the Ivy League saying, we're not going to play spring sports. We're canceling everything going forward.
Yeah, I was with Quinn Kesson when that happened, and I know you know Quinn as well. We were out at Sports Boosters, and you're talking about lacrosse season, right? You're talking about Ivy League lacrosse. You're talking to 6 of the top 15 teams in the country are no longer going to play. And we were look, Chris, you're a rock and roll guy. I'm a rock and roll guy. I remember so far back that I remember when I was angry Pearl Jam canceled. I thought, how dare they? And that's not even a week ago now, right? That's how fast this thing has been moving, much like a hurricane, right? Much like a natural disaster coming at you.
Yeah, and we kept seeing all this. So the conference, among a lot of the conferences, came to the same decision. They said, okay, obviously we're already playing games on Wednesday. We're going to continue the tournament on Thursday with no fans. And those decisions and that information was given out to the fans at the late games Wednesday night. And so when we went back to our hotels on Wednesday night in Frisco, I think most of us thought, and I certainly did, that, hey, we're just kind of in a new normal. We're going to play. It's what's going to look like pickup basketball, and two teams playing, but they're playing legitimately for NCAA berths. At that point, the NCAA tournament they had said they're going to play without fans. Okay, so this is sort of the new normal. I don't think any of us who went to bed that night thought it was going to change the way it did, but the minute that Rudy Gobert tested positive and the NBA pulled the plug late Wednesday, I think everybody sort of looked around and went, wait a second, I think we're headed towards a different reality.
Well, human contact, right? Literally.
Right, exactly. And I think people started to realize that and go, wait a second, I think we need to kind of take another look at this. So we get to Thursday morning. I'll say these all in Central Time because that's what we were working on in Frisco. The first game of the day was top-seeded Rice in a women's tournament against Marshall. That game was set to tip at 11 a.m. At about 10 I had breakfast with some of the Cowboys PR people that morning, and I walked in the arena at 10 after 10 because their building is connected to the practice facility that they use, obviously. So when I walked in at 10 after 10, everything seemed to be fine. I checked in, no changes, no crowds, everybody's here and working. At about 10:30, as all of us begin to check Twitter, we're seeing almost a coordinated announcement from the top five, the Power Five conferences, that they're canceling their tournaments. And again, I saw an administrator from CUSA. I said, hey, take a look at this. And he took one look, and all of a sudden his phone buzzed. He said, I need to go back to a meeting. And at that point, I think we all kind of knew where it was. So Rice and Marshall continue to warm up. We're getting close to about 11. The game's supposed to tip at 11:06. At 11 o'clock, the teams were taken off the floor with the officials back to the locker room. The second game that was supposed to tip at 11:30. Those two teams were in the hallway getting ready to go out for the final warm-ups, the final 20 minutes of warm-up.
That's crazy, right? I mean, when
you
put yourself in 40 years of doing this where you're getting ready to play a game, this is about as strange a day as you've ever had, right?
No doubt.
Literally.
No doubt. As I said this on Twitter, it went from the surreal to the reality in less than 24 hours. And you're having to tell coaches, hey, don't take your players out there right now. We're waiting for an announcement from the conference. You certainly don't want a visual of players going out to start a game and then being pulled off the floor. So just stay back here. I think there's going to be an announcement. And obviously, as word trickled through, now the men's teams were practicing off-site at local facilities for the night games, so they weren't even in the building. You didn't have a lot of media in the building outside of television. So the reality of this hits the student athletes and the coaches, and they're just kind of wide-eyed going, this is over? Yes. The tournament's canceled.
You're canceled. The season's canceled. Your career's canceled. Go home.
Because at that point, remember, at that point, the NCAA had not determined what they were doing with the tournament. This is at noon. This is 11 a.m. Central Time. Hey, the tournament's canceled. Our tournament. Now, as far as the NCAA, no one knew. That didn't come to about 4 or 5 hours later. We packed up what we had to do, and I was on a 3:10 flight out of Love Field back to Baltimore. And by that point, by the time I got on the flight and turned on TV on my phone, I saw that the NCAA had decided the same thing, that the tournament had been canceled. Just before I left, they called the staff together from Conference USA and said, we are canceling all spring sports and practices for the foreseeable future. And that was a fairly emotional decision to make by the conference commissioner, Judy McLeod. Because, to be honest, and I know a lot of people personally, they're very invested in student athletes. And this is as much about the men's lacrosse player at Hopkins as it is about the baseball player at Rice. A team that might make some noise in the NCAAs this year in baseball, or some of the softball teams that CUSA puts out. Whether it's Division III water polo, Division II outdoor track, all these things are, student athlete based and their experiences and their seasons. And so making a decision like that for any conference or the NCAA is difficult. But it was the right thing to do. But you went from 0 to 100 in the space of about 24 hours. And you could tell that there was a lot of strain on a lot of people, not only the coaches and the student athletes of the schools that were in town for the tournament, but obviously as sort of the larger reality hit of saying, hey, there's no more games this year, period. For some of these leagues, they kind of went the way the Ivy League did, and I think everybody else will join.
Just an incredible, pot of emotions, right? For anybody that's ever competed or been on a team, or it's the most important thing in your life. It's so important in your life that you got on a plane and flew to Frisco, Texas, right? Literally.
Right, and there's 100,000 student athletes in the NCAA over 3 divisions, and there's about 37 or 40 sports. I mean, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different student athlete experiences. For the Division I, basketball, football players are on full scholarship, but they get a lot of things beyond that.
Yeah, for Jalen Smith, he's going to go get a contract and go get paid. For some kid at Creighton, this was as good as it's going. I mean, this is exactly it. This is his Super Bowl.
They thought they might have a chance to win the conference tournament and go to the NCAA, so maybe it's the only time in their career and have that moment, and that moment goes away. But what I do think is, I think the Rudy Gobert moment when the NBA pulled the plug, I think that was a larger signal that went out from the sports world to a lot of other people. I think that made people sit up and take notice.
Well, even larger that he took his filthy hands across everyone's microphone on the way out to be a jackass. Because being a jackass is what people should be doing at this point, right? Like, it's all over my Facebook. Again, everybody's running around at St. Patrick's Day. Good for you. Yeah, you're a tough guy.
Right. Well, that's right. But I'm saying that was the first real signal that a major business in the United States pulls the plug and says, no, we can't do this. And as I put on Twitter a few times, and just to friends of mine, we probably had the last normal, in quotes, week in the United States across the board for the foreseeable future. Probably, at least if the CDC Sunday recommendations are correct, they're talking about 8 weeks of no get-togethers of more than 50 people, festivals, concerts, sporting events. So you're looking in the mid-May at this point for resumption of anything on the sporting calendar or anything on the arts or entertainment calendar.
Well, you start to really play this out, and you think about where sports are, where the NCAA gone spring sports, right? Then you think about like a sport like baseball, like basketball. All right, they can ramp it up and play from wherever the season ended, like a split season in '81 with baseball during a strike or during various lockouts or walkouts or work stoppages or Katrinas or anything else that happened, right? But baseball is going to be the hard one, right? Like, you're really one of the fascinating guys because you've worked in all the sports. I mean, literally worked in the NFL. You worked in minor league baseball. You've worked in college sports across the board. So much time in basketball as well. But baseball is the sport where, like, ramping up pitchers and saying, we're going to go away for 6 weeks. We're going to gather in Florida May 1st. We're going to get ready to play games May 20th or whatever that's going to look like, right? That getting pitching together. Baseball's really the sport. I mean, football's almost skating, right? Like, football thinks they're going to play on Labor Day, right?
I would think so. I would think at this point that's the way it'll look. But the point that I made very early on in this process, and I'll repeat it, regardless of how the sports resume, okay? Regardless of how, and for the purpose of this discussion, college sports with a May 15th date at least
is over.
Is done.
Yeah,
They're
it's
done.
over.
I know there was some thought of, hey, if we could get to a point where we were in April, maybe they could salvage enough of a college baseball season, have College World Series or the Softball World Series. That's not going to happen. I firmly think we're done with college sports this year. So we'll talk strictly about the pros. In those stadiums and in those facilities, the people that you need aren't just the players and the coaches. You need, in basketball, you need a table crew, timekeeper, shot clock, statisticians, radio crews, television crews, and all the people like me that work those events. You need, if you're going to have crowds of any type, you need ushers, you need cleaners, you need concessionaires. There are a lot of people who make a very little money, but it's important money to them, and that's why you've seen some of the people step up, like Mark Cuban and Zion Williamson and others. Those are the people you're going to need to get those events off the ground. You can roll the ball out on the court and play a game, but to have any sort of crowd, to have any sort of
experience,
anything around it, you need those other people to be able to work those events and be well enough to work those events or have enough people to do that. So, you may have a situation where the NBA resumes sometime in June, let's say, and goes to the playoffs, but they play the playoffs behind closed doors. But you're still going to need those other people. The Colonial Athletic Association tournament, part of the reason they had stopped, they joined everybody else, well, they had a game referee who had tested positive. So, again, that doesn't affect just the players on the floor. That affects everybody else that works around it, announcers, all of this. And that's where, it'd be great if we could get some semblance of the calendar back in May. It's going to take a while for that to ramp up. And what hockey and basketball will do in terms of trying to get the playoffs. And they've got a different problem because now they've got to get arena dates put together. The hockey and the basketball teams at their facilities, Clippers and Lakers in LA, they're going to have to work out dates to try to get all this done and how they do it. Baseball is their own entity at stadiums. What does a schedule look like? Are you going to redo the entire schedule? How to get everybody to play the same amount of games? What does a league year look like for the players? Because the way Major League Baseball is set up, a service time is based on 172 days on the Major League roster. Games are played 162 games in 186 days. If you're on the Major League roster for 172, it's a service year. So all those are CBA issues that they're going to have to work through as to what a schedule would look like and what a service year would look like, and all the different things. How many additional roster spots will there be in baseball to carry pitchers, at least for the first part of whatever they're going to do? Because if you play any sort of, let's say, June 1st start, and you're trying to get the baseball season done at your normal position, you're going to have to go back to what we haven't seen since the late 1950s, early 1960s, and that's doubleheaders.
Yeah. I can't imagine that now that they've stopped this thing and we're a couple weeks out on opening day, or what would have been opening day, a week and a half out on opening day, I know baseball thinks 14 days from now we're just going to green light this and move on. I'm telling you, dude, and you're telling me, and we're in real conservative agreement here, that ain't nothing going to be normal about any of this. And that's just the sports side of things, That has nothing to do with the finances and what's going to happen here and insurances and how many people are going to die and what's going to happen with hospitals and transportation and entertainment and, who's going to get their feelings hurt and who's going to run out of food and toilet paper and whatever else is going to happen. But the sports side of this thing, like as a format, Chris, it's all I've done. And privately over the last 2 years, I've questioned the future of sports in this country. And me being a 51-year-old and thinking that when I'm 61 and 71, I'm going to be paying my bills the way I was when I was 41 and 31 and 21 off of a sports media life. And I got to tell you, I don't see it. And now that sports has been taken away, I am much, much more prepared for this than I would have been 10 or 20 years ago, psychologically, from it, oh my God, the game's not on, to how am I going to feed my family, which is a concern,
Well, again, it's very small potatoes, and I'll be the first person to say it. But I also believe that once the games come back, and they will come back at some future date, that you will see people who will want those diversions, who will want to get outside and get to some of those events, and whether it's major league or minor league or whatever that is, or whatever that calendar looks like from June until the NFL starts in September, and we get back to the normal sporting calendar again, you could see record ratings on television because people are sitting at home or whatever, or watching, or people that are going to the games. Attendance numbers are up because you're going to do ticket specials. You're going to slash ticket prices. You just want to get people in the door and get them out. So you may see.
The business model of sports will change in the aftermath of all this.
The business model will there, and a lot of that's going to depend on what insurance policies are in place, what the agreements between the networks and the pro sports leagues are like. What where does all that sort of take place? What safeguards are there in there? The NCAA at one point had $400 million that they had saved up for a rainy day in case of a cancellation of a tournament. And they used about $200 million to get the schools, and then they used another $200 million as far as payment for a lawsuit that the schools wouldn't have to pay any part of it. So they had blown through the $400 million that they had in reserve, so they have lost the basketball tournament. Now they don't have that. There may be effects on schools and scholarships and other things that we can't even game out right now, going to Division I, Division II, Division III, going out a couple of years. There will be some effects that will be felt from this to them, and we're a long way away, and at least important, but gaming this out 6 months to a year, there's going to be effects to it.
All right, so what's the thing you're going to do here in the coming weeks that you haven't done that's unnormal for you? What's going to clear your mind in the next couple weeks from what is not normal? Because I'm going to ask everybody this question. Is there something you're going to learn French or something in the after? I'm wondering, like when my wife got sick, I put off some tasks And when I had sort of this downtime, which I've unfortunately had twice in my life, I found projects to do. I hope people find a way to keep themselves occupied, because for all of us, dude, you're older than me. You've been watching sports longer and harder than I have, right? Like in the same way with concerts and going out to dinner, the things we enjoy doing, whatever things we have appreciated in the past that will be taken away from us, whatever it is. This is a time, I think, of reflection for every human being in our culture about what is and what isn't important. I was taken to task with that 6 years ago this week.
Well, Kate and I are we're finalizing buying a house in about 5 weeks. I mean, so that's going to take up a good bit of part of our time in terms of packing up, where we are currently to move where we're going, getting that part done. So there's going to be a lot to do there. There's going to be some cleanup work that I've got to get done for the Pro Football Writers. That's going to remain going. The Bahamas Bowl, we're a long way away from college football season and any discussions there, but you still have planning to do. So there are some things involved with that. So on the professional level, there will be things to do. I'll probably be hunting some other, freelance things to add to the pot, because I have time. But
visit with Nestor more often. It's good.
Yeah,
you live here now, Baltimore.
More often, do a little work for you, whatever that is, or whatever that looks like. And I guess I'm a little bit lucky. I grew up in the '70s where you came home and watched. Your parents weren't home, so you came home and you watched The Price is Right, the match game, right? And you kept yourself busy. I would play with the baseball cards. I would play the baseball games upstairs, or listen to the radio, or whatever. I didn't have sort of this where I've got to be somewhere every night. Now, sports is a different deal because you're working it. It's a job, believe it or not, when you're doing those events.
I've been trying to tell people that for 30 years, Chris.
And so I guess, being at home right now, this is great. It's like I can get things done, we get things cleaned up. You want your paperwork, finish taxes, doing all the mundane things that you need to do, and life maintenance things. Maybe, I've got these DVDs I had gotten a year ago of DP yoga. Maybe I get involved in that. I was talking to Luke Jones about that. The Super Bowl would be a great chance to sit down and actually,
Can you imagine at the end of all this? I mean, you lose 20 or 30 pounds and don't even have to get the virus to do it? Think about it. This is the opportunity I'm talking about, Pika, for everybody out there. This is your chance to do something you've never had the time to do. Now you have the time to do it.
You have the time to do it, and you have the time, and, it's like everybody said, it's reaching out to friends, making sure people's mental states are good. I guess we had always talked about this, and you and I had always sort of had a I wouldn't say a semi-argument. We had a discussion about baseball on the radio and the importance of it. I always say, it's incredibly important to shut in. And that's a term that our grandparents used. I think our parents used too. These were people who, my father-in-law is in his 90s. He is in an assisted living facility outside of Nashville. They are basically on lockdown to outside visitors. Okay? It's just going to be them and the staff until further notice. So phone calls, letters, emails, communication is incredibly important to them because they won't have the physical opportunity to see family members or friends for several weeks is the way it looks. And so that's the way it is with all of us, as we follow the directives and we practice, I won't say social distancing, physical distancing from each other. If social distancing doesn't mean that. Social distance is picking up that phone, emailing, reaching out to a friend you haven't heard from in a while, and checking and making sure everybody mentally is going through this, because we're going to go through this together as a country, and we're going to go through this together as a planet for the next several weeks, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't think any of us even dream it being any other way. And, we just have to be kind to one another at this point. I say this all the time. Stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourself, take care of the people in your close circles, and we'll get through it. It's just going to take time. This is not a snow day. This is not a blizzard where you're out of school for a week. This is going to be a while, and there are ways to be outside. There are ways of being out and around without being around people where you're shut in, but you're not a complete shut in. So you have to be smart, and hopefully everybody gets out of this as healthy as possible, because this is unlike anything that we have seen in the United States for a century. Think about that. Spanish flu of 1918 was the last time a major pandemic has threatened a good part of the population.
This is the part where the radio guy in me says, hey, during the pandemic, make sure you're listening to me. Chris, man, I love you. Hang in there. We'll get together, and condolences on the loss of your feline, and, I know that pain as well. We're trying to get onward and upward, and as I've said to my wife every day since the pandemic began, what time's the game on, honey? I'll continue to say that. Chris, take care, man. We'll be in touch, all right? Blog and tackle, finding Chris Pika. He will not be at Mount St. Joe. He will not be at Loyola, and he will have gloves on if you see him out at the supermarket somewhere in Charles Village, all right? You got it. There he goes. Chris Pika, blog and tackle, my first media friend from the Baltimore News American, or as Don Moeller once called it, the News Post. Baltimore Positive will resume. It is intact. You will hear from Frank Kelly this week. We will also get together and with some other folks on the phone line. So the one thing we have here at WNST is bandwidth. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have LinkedIn, we have Snapchat, we have Instagram, we have Facebook Live, we have YouTube Live. And I am pandemic-free here with my cat and wife, and I'm going to continue on trying to have intelligent conversations. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore stuff, even during a pandemic. We're not going anywhere.